Ask George is brought to you by International Cricket Tours. International Cricket Tours are experts at cricket, but experts of international travel with decades of experience behind them. If you love cricket, if you love touring, use International Cricket Tours.
So after day 3 of the second test at Lord's, it's time to ask George.
Very much a lot of emphasis on George, as in you better keep your voice down. It was a bit like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Awkward.
Yeah, should we do that again?
No, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I tell you what, we'll ask both of you, but we'll ask Mark more. So let's kick off with our first question. Neil Varani's going to ask, or has asked, it's all very well getting 100 without anyone noticing, but do we need to worry about Joe Root's failure to convert pretty centuries into doubles? The old double century problem.
You want to go first?
So I would love to have that problem with any
Sri
Lankan batters. Watching Joe Root, even as a Sri Lankan fan, is quite incredible, isn't it? Like, it's really annoying. I was on a friend of the cricketer, John Norman's podcast earlier, and I compared watching Joe Root and him scoring centuries against Sri Lanka to watching Man United in the 90s as a Liverpool fan, where it's just like, it just feels inevitable, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, he comes to the crease, he's just kind of doing his thing, you don't even notice it, and then suddenly it's a half century and everyone's going, oh, it's so classy, he doesn't even celebrate them anymore, and then next thing you know, it's like he's in the 80s, and then suddenly every time there's like whole new records that he's breaking, and I just think, don't worry about the double centuries, just enjoy it for the here and now and enjoy the moment, right? Because in the not too distant future, he'll decide he's had enough.
Well, I don't know that he will. I think we've got years more of this, haven't we? I mean, he's not old. I know he's the age Alistair Cook was when he quit, but I think he's still got a hunger for it.
But right, so 5 years, but they play, 6 times a year at home? So you've got 30 more matches, so there's potentially 60 more centuries if he's fully fit for...
You know how we judge everything here? It's 2 more Ashes.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. That's the way to think of it. Who
Can
knows?
he do it in Australia? That's really the big question.
Well, he's got a lot of 50s there, but he actually doesn't have 100 there, so I guess that's something he's still got to do. I don't think those personal milestones, I genuinely don't think they're what motivates him. I think one of the great things about him is that he's motivated by winning. And that's what, these innings are helping England win. Without him, England might not have won the last test, might they, in Manchester?
He's the difference today, isn't he?
He's the difference today.
In this test match, they're basically now got to try and get the runs that Joe Root has got over the last, 3 days.
I think the Australia issue is for people whose sort of his career summary page on a rival website exists rent-free in their heads. I think ultimately, as George kind of touched upon, like what's much more important is not that he's never scored 100 in Australia, he's never won a series in Australia. And ultimately that's kind of the...
I don't think he's won a test.
And ultimately that's going to, obviously he was captain of one of the disastrous tours. And ultimately I think that's far more relevant. This double century problem, it's a non-thing as far as I'm concerned.
No, of course it is, but it was a joke, wasn't it, the question? But,
I hope so.
Neil's a very funny guy.
Yeah, he is. He is. He's
like his old material.
Joe Root is a gem of a player, obviously, and England are incredibly lucky to have him. I think we've been really lucky to watch him.
Let's move on. Joel Edwards asks, should the pink ball all be used in tests? At least it would last longer than the Dukes.
I hate the pink ball. What do you think first?
I think we need to think about it as it's a TV show, and actually it'd be much better off if it started a little bit later in the day and went into the evening. You stick it on,
I need to sneeze.
And
sorry,
and you wouldn't have any problems with the light. And why is it in 2024 when we can have AI do all sorts of jobs of humans that we can't figure out how to light up a stadium?
Oh, well,
there's actual floodlights here.
I agree with that, because the problem is not the ball so much as the lighting.
Yeah.
Because I think they've got to keep using the red ball. Because the pink ball's rubbish. It just doesn't really work. It becomes flat and soft and attritional and dull. And the only time it does anything, it's not really the ball, I think, it's because the lights are just coming on and they're not good enough. So we've got to make the lights better. But I'm not sure that the pink ball is the answer, but I get the frustration a very sensible frustration, reasonable frustration from spectators who are basically saying, Well, wait there. You can't just walk off. We've paid a fortune. We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
By the way, the MCC watched it as well.
Oh dear.
Hello, MCC, who watch everything. No, they're very reasonable. It's a difficult balancing act, was their point. It's amazing because Mark's been talking, I don't think we introduced Mark properly, did we? Mark from the Murali End podcast, excellent podcast, particularly yesterday.
You brought a bit of class to yesterday's episode, George. So.
Well, it's called John Norman on it, but yeah. Mark's been saying how he's been stopped and people have been saying, enjoyed Ask George and stuff. And actually, it's amazing the people who come up and say, so Richard Gould, hello Richard Gould, watched it. Don Topley's wife, Julia, sent me a horrendous picture of what I looked like yesterday. In fact, shall I try and find it? I mean, very, very unflattering. I tell you what I'll do, when we put it out, I'll send the 2 pictures of people I was tweeted in the last 24 hours, people who said I look like. It's very, very bad. And we'll accompany this with that.
Anyway, that's good because Owen, our editor, doesn't have enough work to do as it is. So he'll be delighted
Shall I
about that.
send them to you?
From what I know, from what little amount I know about video editing, that will make the whole process a lot quicker.
Well, that's good because Owen was just saying, Owen's the other side of this camera. Owen was just saying to me that he wanted to spend Saturday night in the press box at Lord's on his own.
Yeah, he mentioned something about the early finish being a bit frustrating. He really wanted to get his teeth into something, so we should probably do that. Excellent. Hopefully no one actually heard any of that. So
anyway,
great for production value.
Yeah. So I think that the point about the pink ball is that the pink ball technology isn't there yet, and I don't think that's the answer. But I do understand the frustration. It's reasonable.
I think day night has got to be the way forward, right? You want
well, not in England, it isn't.
Why not?
Because it's bloody cold.
Is this too cold to play warm up?
It's not about playing. It's not about playing. It's about people sitting here. It doesn't really work in England.
Think about the branded blankets that you could get sponsorship for.
Don't give them ideas.
Like
the MCC have just written that down.
I think the one weird thing about the day-night testing is more that we spend an awful lot of time thinking of different funky ways to do cricket in this country, and yet I think we picked up and put down the day-night thing really, really quickly.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that necessarily means that it will definitely work if we try it again. I just mean that I think we abandoned it really, 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 really quick. I think it could potentially work, but there are obviously a lot of drawbacks. And we talked about the TV show element. I guess the quality of the ball you have is part of that as well, right?
Yeah.
But mainly it was about frostbite. And also the fact that if you play in those hours, I'm not sure they work particularly well for India. And that's where so much of the market is. So anyway, it works in other countries, but in England, for a lot of the year, it doesn't get dark. You know what it's like in June. In particular, it's not dark till 10 p.m. So it just looks a bit weird. Yeah. And it's cold. It's not the same as being in the Caribbean or, the ones in Adelaide kind of work, but the ball, I don't think the ball works.
I think it's worth looking at again.
I think that's reasonable.
Seeing if you can, go to the ball manufacturers.
Well, if you had grounds with roofs, I go on about this so often, but if you had a ground with a roof, you can turn the bloody heating up. And the lights have got to be better.
Lights, yes.
But people in the neighbourhood complain about the lights here. And there's no one in this neighbourhood, not even Paul McCartney, who's lived here since the dawn of time, moved here before there was a cricket ground.
Yeah.
And what do they expect to happen, by the way, if the cricket ground moves?
No, it's my big bugbear that you move next to somewhere that, this is the home of cricket. And it was the home of cricket before anyone, as you say.
I think they'd be great neighbours. Like 15 days a year, it's quite hard to park and you hear glasses being dropped into a bin.
Well, other than that, it's fine.
Every neighbour's worse than that 15 days a year, don't you reckon?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know how we got onto that.
No.
Can't remember what the original question was. Let's move on to Richard Pugh then. Would you consider Brook at number 3 and Pope at number 5? Brook seems more quote-unquote bomb-proof than Pope.
I don't know. I mean, Brook's working at 5, isn't he? Doesn't Pope have to make a go of it at 3 or not make it? I mean, he doesn't have to be picked. His test average now is 34. His first class batting average this season is something like 24. These are not small sample sizes. I'm not at all worried about the dismissal today. I thought it was actually quite selfless batting. from a captain who's trying to help his side get to a declaration. I've got no issues with today's dismissal. And actually, I think he's captained well. So I don't get the criticism of his captaincy. He's just got to score some more runs. He's got to score some more runs. And he's quite consistently not scoring that many. And he's, got these big 100 against Ireland, big 100 against a modest West Indies side who weren't playing at their best. He's obviously played some great innings, Hyderabad, Gurkha, all sorts of innings. But he's not doing it consistently, and I'm not sure that moving him again is the way to go. I think he's now played 48 tests. To me, that seems like quite a large sample size. I'm just not sure he's a number 3.
Mark, any thoughts on that? I mean, it sounded like you disagreed with the question and started like you finished like you'd agreed with it.
No, because he doesn't have to. You don't have to keep him in the side. If he can't make it at number 3 and that's the spot available, then he leaves the side. There are other people. I mean, Jordan Cox is next in line right now, but I think Josh Bohannon, I think Sam Hain, I think there'll be Keaton Jennings. There are other people who should come into the equation. It doesn't have to just be Ollie Pope. There are a generation of former England players, Graham Hick, Mark Ramprakash, John Crawley, whoever, James Vince even, who would have loved this patience that's been shown in him. And then if you invest this amount in someone, that you need a return eventually. And I'm not sure. I reckon there are a lot of county players. I reckon if you put this amount of games into Tom Abel or Jake Libby, this amount of games, no, they would get some runs sometimes.
Yeah.
They're all good players, yeah? It's about doing it consistently, and he is absolutely not scoring runs consistently. And I'm not saying drop him, I'm not saying he's hopeless or anything like that. It's a bit weird how it doesn't seem to come into the equation. He doesn't have to be picked. He doesn't have to bat at 5 because he's not making it at 3. So why weaken a strength? And the strength of this England side is they're 4, 5, 6, 7 right now. Why weaken that for Ollie Pope? It's about what's best for the team. That's all. What do you
sort of flaunting these abundance of options in front of you here, slightly unfairly, but where's your position?
I think I agree with George. There's no point tearing up the good parts to try and fix the problem. The problem is he's not scoring runs.
Yeah.
Either you go away and do whatever work needs to be done with Ollie Pope so you start scoring runs again, or you try something else. I've been on this show now, I think this is my 7th appearance. And what I've discovered...
Continuity of selection.
I'm pretty trying to drink the Kool-Aid now. And it's like, if it is about the Ashes, if that's the big thing that you're building towards, which is what the team says it is, then is he going to be someone who you think is going to get you runs on Boxing Day at the MCG?
Do you know, just on that, I wouldn't absolutely guarantee he won't, by the way, because I do believe there's a lot of ability there. But he's got real skittish.
Yeah.
And actually maybe a period working on his game. Joe Root's just been saying in the press that he really, really benefited from COVID, and that period where he got to reflect on his game, very unusual on the relentless merry-go-round that they're on, and he was able to reflect and rebuild his game because he took some time out. Well, it doesn't have to be the end of the world to be dropped. It doesn't have to be this negative. I think he's capable of really, really brilliant things, and England aren't getting the best out of him. And you could drop someone benevolently. Actually, Joe Root was dropped at the end of the Ashes in 13-14. So maybe it's the time to do that. So, I hope it doesn't come across that I'm having a right go at Ollie Pope and saying he's hopeless and stuff. That's honestly not what I think. I don't blame him at all for today. I think he's captained well and selflessly. I get why they like him. The character's obviously good. He's not scoring that many runs, and that is the primary role.
I think he was a big reason why Sri Lanka chose to bowl on day one, because I think they can get those early wickets and get into 4, 5 and 6 early on. I mean, obviously, their big problem is they can't get Joe Root out, but
they were right. They did get in them early, and he was skittish, and so I've got no criticism of them choosing to bowl first, to be honest.
But you shouldn't be in a position where your top order is dictating what the opposition are kind of, to that degree. Obviously your top order is going to have some impact on it, but they shouldn't be confident about being able to get them out.
Australia are going to come hard, aren't they, as things stand? But he might be able to withstand it. He might. He played a great innings in Hyderabad under all this pressure. The innings that Royal Dravid is literally saying at the end of it, oh, it's as good as I've ever seen. You've got to listen to this stuff. He out-batted Joe Root in Gurburka. They batted together for hours, and he looked the better player. There's so much to like there, and I really love the continuity of selection thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's working.
Yeah.
Occidental tourists ask, despite the success of the summer to date, should England be concerned by the flakiness of the top three?
Well, I think
we kind of touched. Mark actually quite cleverly sort of touched upon that. Actually, I think it's an interesting get that viewpoint from the outside of what actually maybe is the weakest part of England's team. Maybe that says more about the strengths of the other parts. I don't know, but interesting. And we can sort of develop on that. And
well, Zach Corley's never looked so good, has he?
He's not here. So, do you know what I mean? So Dan Lawrence, I mean, bless him. It's not particularly relevant how he's doing. He's not going to be opening the batting in the Ashes, is he?
No.
I think we've established that. He did a miracle in the Oval. And Ben Duckett's fine. He's doing fine. He looks good. He's nicking off a bit, but sometimes in circumstances like today, there are caveats. I'm not worried about Duckett or Crawley, really. Crawley plays fast bowling very well. Doesn't play the moving ball so well. So those two are going to be there. We're just talking about number 3 again, then.
Yeah. I think they've got different options, and they've boxed themselves into a corner a bit by giving the captaincy to Pope, because for somebody who's not scoring runs consistently, probably the last thing you needed was to be captain. But when you're vice captain and your captain goes down, it's an opportunity to captain your country. You're never going to say, "Sorry, boss, I can't do this right now."
And also, you don't probably turn that down. You don't turn that down. It doesn't matter how you play. I mean, I captained a first 11 football team once. Like most of the players are missing, they were either ill or off or whatever. And I was like, yeah, of course I will. We lost 8-0. Yeah. But what the point is, I was still thinking about it, rent free. But I was never going to say no, even though it was a watered down team. I was still going to say, oh yeah, I captained the first one. So I might tell everyone else.
So I haven't told you what I was writing yet. I should have done. But I'm not going to.
Oh, okay, cool.
But it's half
was it about Ollie Pope?
Well, it was about the way that Ramprakash and Hick were treated when they were England players. I think Hick was dropped and recalled 10 times, maybe even more than that. Up and down the order, no patience, no continuity of selection. Obviously didn't work. He ended up with a test average of 31. Good enough to have averaged 50 probably, amazing player. So, and similar with Ramprakash. And compare that with the sort of long lease that Ollie Pope's been given. But in a funny way, what you're saying is that all the faith shown in him has actually put him under more pressure.
Yeah.
That maybe he isn't a natural number 3, maybe he isn't a natural captain. I think he's captain fine. But all the faith that they've shown in him actually has made it a bit more difficult for them and him to maybe take him out of the side for a while and allow him to rebuild his game at Surrey. Don't know, it's interesting. I always thought, how would they do in this era? And I think they'd do great, to be fair. But looking at him, don't know. His average is getting Hickian in Test cricket. It's 34, I think Hicks was 31.5.
Indoor Kite Society asks, what next for Sri Lanka, and which of their players should the counties in England be looking at for next summer? Mark, who immediately springs out? Who's
well, I think Kamindu Mendis is I'd be surprised if counties weren't looking at him. I think some of the bowlers probably might be able to get a game. Kamara, I think one of the issues might be Pathum Nissanka, who's a player I absolutely adore, hasn't really lit up Lords, sadly. You're probably not going to be able to get him in, because I think he'll be in demand by next summer for franchise deals. But some of the older players like Chandimal, Matthews, Dhananjaya, Dimmoth. I know Dimmoth had a short run at Yorkshire. They're all desperate to play county cricket, and they want to come, and they don't want to come in for 2 or 3 games. They want to come and do a whole summer if they can. And I'm not sure, I can't remember what Sri Lanka have planned next summer, if they've got, this time next year. Obviously in Sri Lanka they don't have a summer, they just play cricket all the time. So I can't remember if there's any test matches on, but I think you'd be able to get them for long stints in the counties if you wanted to. Basically they're all up for grabs.
The counties to some extent aren't massively in need of batters, generally. I know there are some batters who come in from overseas and do well, but if you look at some of the players being signed by counties at the moment, they're quite low-profile bowlers who are almost workhorses. I mean, it's almost like the county directors of cricket are having a competition to sign the lowest profile club cricketer from New Zealand right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they are amazing names. As someone who works in cricket and is a New Zealander, I've never heard some of the people being signed as overseas players right now. And there are 4 or 5 of them who I reckon a lot of cricket lovers wouldn't have heard of. So it's bowlers that they're after, really, and they've got to be fit and sturdy and available, and I don't know.
I know there's a slight finance issue with this, but put that aside, is it time to unrestrict counties from the number of overseas players they can sign?
There is definitely a conversation to be had around how do you encourage and support first-class cricket across the world.
Yeah.
And personally, I'd love to have other sides involved and take it up to 21 teams. So you'd add 3 teams, potentially, and then have 3 divisions as well. But funding, or the neighbours would complain, won't they? Funding for that obviously is demanding. But it could really, really help if you were a young Sri Lankan player and you had a year playing here in the county championship. I don't know. I know that I've mentioned this before, and people think it's outlandish. It has happened before. Several England players, in fact, I think didn't Alistair Cook do it? Played a season in the Caribbean, didn't they? In what was then the Red Stripe Shield, was it? So these things, they're not beyond the wit of humanity to sort out. And I think it would be beneficial both to the English game and to the Sri Lankan game, and you could do it maybe with
the thing I would love to see for next summer, and I'm not sure if the dates work out because I can't remember when that 4-day test with Zimbabwe is.
May.
Would there be time to get some of those Zimbabwean players into the county system before that to have a bit of a run at county?
There'll be 5-6 rounds before that. Yeah,
there'll be lots of rounds before that. But why would a county? Do they get into the county side?
Why would they get
no, but even if they don't, if they come in, just practicing with the team, play. There's definitely some players, and people like Blessings who will be playing for Zimbabwe. Definitely walk into most county teams.
Yep.
Come in, learn to play in the conditions. Maybe a few Zimbabwe fans might turn up to meet their heroes. I don't know, and it might make that 4th test a little bit more competitive. I still don't think England are at risk of losing that test.
No,
because
but also
Zimbabwe have had 5 or 6 players play the first few rounds of the county championship, right?
But you also just got maybe that I'm coming round to the neighbours' point of view ever remote. But maybe this isn't Lord's. Maybe this is Paul McCartney's house. He's just had a barbecue, and these are the empties. I don't know. The counties obviously have young players who they just want to develop, and that is their role, and the county members will want that to happen. So it's not easy. They don't just exist to develop
I know.
international cricketers. No, it's absolutely a fair point that there needs to be a balance, and I think we'd all accept that there are lots of worries about international, or the future of Test cricket in particular, and we need to have these conversations where we try and think of things differently, which is why, back to the MCC thing, it was slightly disappointing when they had their Connect event that it was all the same people talking about all the same things, as Richard Thompson says hello as he walks past, ignoring that, no doubt. I mean, not that he was, I don't even know that he was at that event, but there need to be fresh ideas from different people, I think, to try and find a way to make it work, because at the moment I think we're sliding in terms of Test cricket, and I think we talked the other day about, will Sri Lanka ever tour here again for a 3-test series? Right now, I think it looks unlikely, no?
See, I think the thing is actually not how they do on the pitch. I think the thing is, can they sell seats? Is there an interest in it? Is there public interest in it?
Well, he said at the start of the summer that they could sell out here for, I think he said Nepal, but it may have been Papua New Guinea. And I think they've realised it's wrong.
Yeah, and I think they need to. That's the thing they need to fix, because they should be in a position where they can sell out Nepal and Papua New Guinea. And I think there is simple things they could do, and not just turning the ticket prices down. I think there's a bit more marketing and being a bit more tactical with the way they do it.
They've got to stop thinking that the spectators, if they put on a game, spectators will come.
Yeah,
they've got to respect the audience more. And there was a lot of talk in that Connect thing about the importance of spectators. Bloody have some there then.
Yeah.
Have some spectators there, ask them.
Yeah.
Because they pay actually the bills of everyone involved, including us.
Correct.
let's move on from that and to something a little
Is
bit
there more?
There is one more. There's one more bit.
I just want to keep Owen here. He's giving out. Look at that look in his eyes.
Yeah, no, he's just thinking about those images. He's going to have to edit.
He's not going to make it home for match of the day. At the
show. Absolutely. Yeah. Tomorrow's match of the day. I'm just going to sign off with a bit of a fun one very quickly. Might have been a tad controversial, but would it make it more competitive if England played a combined West Indies Sri Lanka team?
Well, the West Indies is already a combined side, of course.
Yep.
Would it make it more competitive? I mean, it's if I were you, or if I was someone watching this from the Caribbean now, I'd find that the most patronising thing I'd ever heard.
Yeah. I hate this question, by the way.
Well, it's completely fair to ask it. It's tongue in cheek.
Maybe it's fun, but
who's it from?
Unfortunately, I haven't been given the name.
Okay,
our viewers would have seen it on the screen.
Yeah, but I think that it was probably tongue in cheek and completely reasonable. You know, as ever, we're very grateful for the questions. But God, how many times have we seen England absolutely smashed abroad? Yeah, in India and Australia. How would we feel if someone said, well, maybe, throw a few players in from other countries, put Kane Williamson and Virat. Paul McCartney's really going for it.
South Africa and just got a load of.
Well, no, I don't know if you're aware of that. No, not a single Kolpat player has ever played for England. But I don't know if you're aware of this whole empire thing. England had
As a Sri Lankan, I've heard of it, yes.
You've heard of it, yeah.
Britain had this thing for a while where they, we tried very hard to help other countries by borrowing their resources for a while and all these sorts of things. So a lot of people have dual heritage, don't they, and can use their passports however they like. And so I always think it's much better that people are able to play for the country which their relatives might have a link with than they couldn't. I mean, that would be a lot more sinister, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very positive thing, but I think it would be really, really horribly patronising, and that is a sign of terrible failure if we're having to talk about these sorts of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we're stooping to trying to find mitigation to make Test cricket work, we're doing something wrong. I don't think that's the answer.
I do also think there is a difference between West Indies and Sri Lanka. I think Sri Lanka just played badly. I mean, you look at the averages, you look at the Test experience. They shouldn't be in a situation where they have to get 480.
Yeah, that batting order should have got 400 yesterday.
It should be better, right? Especially after, Old Trafford should have been the time when they got used to playing these conditions, right? It's been much warmer. It's much more. The conditions were much more favourable for them this time. Sri Lanka are in a different position to the West Indies. I think the bigger question should be, what, if anything, is it too late? What can we do, or is it already too late to stop the best players in Sri Lanka and the West Indies going off and playing white ball cricket? Because the best players in West Indies now don't play red ball. The best players in Sri Lanka coming through, the young ones, all the ones that go off playing the IPL, are never going to play red ball cricket anymore as well. So I wonder if the next time Sri Lanka do come, if it's a one-off test or if it's a 3 test match series, whether they'll end up being similar to what the West Indies were like in terms of the team that ends up being on the pitch and what the standard of it's going to be. And overall, what that's going to do is eventually they'll just become uncompetitive. They'll keep playing the other nations that they play all the time, the Afghanistans, the Bangladeshis, possibly Ireland.
But not in Test cricket.
Not in Test cricket. Occasionally they might have one-offs against them in Test matches, and they'll arrive in England with great averages, but then they won't be able to do anything when the ball starts moving, and we'll repeat this cycle in 5 years' time, get worse and worse.
Unless we do things differently.
Yeah, and until it just gets to the point where England are only playing India.
There are all sorts of things you could do. I mean, the central contracts it could be similar to the contracts with the ICC and the member nations, and the member nations' contract with their players could also be similar. The amount of money they get is dependent on which games they play, which formats they're promoting. It would be a bit like the county partnership agreements in England. I think there are ways that this could be done, but there has to be some joined up thinking and understanding that we're all better if everyone's better.
I think you're right, but I also think now you've got a situation when you speak to the young Sri Lankan players. So I'm talking people like Patarana, Deekshana, Hasaranga, even though he's kind of slightly older. Those guys are never going to play red ball cricket, not because they don't want to, not because they don't love Test cricket, and not because Sri Lanka doesn't mean everything to them, but just the amount of money they make from franchise cricket and the influence of the IPL teams are having on them means that they're being encouraged not to play it. All the focus is going into to the white ball game increasingly.
It is now, but
I don't think this isn't a case of the money will solve it, because the money isn't ever going to catch up anymore. The schism's too big.
So the BCCI own the IPL.
Yeah.
And and at the moment they're only putting something like 12 or 15% of the money that the IPL earns back into player salaries.
Yeah.
So there's a huge amount of money washing around. And you could easily say, Test cricket has been subsidising all the other formats of the game actually in England for quite a long time. So it doesn't seem so unreasonable to think that you could have a deal where the ICC say, you get X amount a year, but for that we need you to play 7 tests and 15 ODIs and 15 T20s, something like that.
Yeah.
And then the contracts, which are help funded because the broadcast model changes so that Sri Lanka, for example, would get a share of the ECB broadcast deal from this tour. Look, you know these arguments.
Yeah.
There might be lots of good reasons, but people are shouting at their screens and going, this is a stupid idea. I don't know. Have those bloody debates, though. Have those conversations, because we are sliding towards a pretty grim future, I think, in Test cricket anyway. I mean, there'll still be lovely cricket to watch, but, if we value Test cricket...
Maybe franchise Test cricket's the way forward. Maybe we want to see 5 days of Mumbai Indians versus Chennai Super Kings.
Maybe. I mean, again, I'm open-minded. Maybe that is the future, but... I don't know maybe that is the future. I mean, it's not so different from the rest of the world tests and World Series and stuff like that. It's not so different. Maybe that's the future. I don't know. It doesn't massively fill me with... You see, I don't care. Why would I care about the results of a franchise tournament? It's got nothing to do... I grew up supporting Somerset, really.
Yeah.
Why would I care... if they were bought out by a side which had nothing to do with them, say from Cincinnati, and they didn't have any local players, and they didn't really have anything, they just used the ground, rented it out, why would I give a toss? Why would there be any investment?
The problem is in football, which has many more eyeballs on it than in the Premier League, has many more eyeballs on it than any cricket does in England, at least. They are, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea don't have any, have very few homegrown players, aren't owned by people who have any relationship with the local area or the club.
Well, sometimes
they've managed to kind of make that kind of model work. So
they have a bit, but is it working, or is it actually alienating people ever more? I mean, they love football, they love their club, and that love is exploited on a daily basis. But I don't know that it's working, because it seems to me there's quite a lot of anger and resentment out there.
But
they're still making money.
They're still making money. There's still
people,
bums and seats. There's still people watching it. There's still people want to play in it. I know there is people upset with the way it's gone. But everything you do in life, you're going to upset people. You're going to alienate people, right? So you've got to come up with a way that's bring as many people on board as possible. It's inevitable, right? If cricket does become, if county cricket somehow magically becomes the most watched thing in every summer, eventually people with very deep pockets will come in and try and buy chunks of it, and it will change things. That's the nature of the world we live in.
I am tempted to ask you both what your 27 favourite things from an aisle of Sainsbury's would be, just to see Owen's face when I do it. But I really think unless we let him go now, he might go completely mad. We'll see you tomorrow. Is it tomorrow yet? Thanks for listening. Thanks for the questions.